I am Allison Cardona, and I am California State Director at UC Davis Koret Shelter Medicine Program, and I'm honored to be the moderator for this session. My camera is off for technical difficulties, but I'm so excited to introduce this workshop, Assessing and Addressing Standards of Animal Care. In this workshop, it's designed to provide an overview of standards of animal care and what you may encounter in a co-sheltering environment. There may be confusion or uncertainty about how to assess and address when an animal appears to have an injury, lack of care, and even neglect. Attendees will come away with a more nuanced understanding of animal care through a holistic approach that includes the person caring for the animal. Vincent Medley is our speaker today. He is the Maddie's Director of Human Animal Support Services. Vincent spent 21 years as a leader of 4 of the largest government-funded animal shelters in the U.S., Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, and Philadelphia, where he served at every level of shelter operations and management and led through some of the toughest transitions. Vincent was also the CEO of a nonprofit shelter that contracted enforcement and shelter services within large city governments and has been a frequent speaker and trainer in animal shelters and at conferences across the country. Most recently, Vincent was the Senior Coordinator and Program Manager at the Humane Society of the United States Outreach, Engagement, and Training Law Enforcement Training Center. He has experience in the business world as well. He is a Lean Six Sigma white belt and a life coach. Vincent's background, experience, and values drive his commitment to life-saving and the Haas model of keeping people and pets together. Welcome, Vincent, and I'll turn it over to you.
Wow, thank you for that intro, Allison. And it's such an honor to be here. You know, I also, just in case you know, I also sell watches and wash cars. Actually, I'm joking. No, it's such an honor to be here. And it's such an honor to have a moderator like Allison, somebody I respect so much and have watched from afar. And I don't think we've met in person before, but I'm very familiar with your work, Allison. And I just thank My Dog Is My Home team for inviting me to be part of this webinar. Part of this conference. I think it's so much needed in animal welfare. So without further ado, I am going to share screen and we'll get into the presentation. Keep in mind, you can put your questions in the Whova app, and Allison will either prompt me during the discussion, but we'll also have a Q&A at the end if you want to save it for the end. But I'm also very much open to having questions during the presentation if something comes up for you that you think would be, that you want to know right off, right as soon as you think of the question. So let me share my screen. So like was already announced, just so you know, the course that you are in is Assessing and Addressing Standards of Care for animal for animal care in those certain shelter environments and situations. And what I'm going to do, give me 1 second. I am going to switch to presenter screen. It's a minor miracle that I am going to be using notes. This is probably one of the first times I've used notes in any of my presentations. So just bear with me real quick. Isabel, wrong place. Let me see. Let me try it one more time. Okay, sweet. All right. So as part of this presentation, some of the things that we want to take a note of is, this is all about our encounters with individuals experiencing homelessness with their pets, and things like encampments and some of the laws and public safety and perceptions around abuse and neglect. Examining our own beliefs and biases, stereotypes. We all have them. I had them. Allison and I were talking before the presentation about being cruelty investigators and, just some of the training and the stereotypes that we had to deal with, we had to overcome in our career regarding that. And also a belief that pets only thrive in a home environment, which is something we are indoctrinated in because of the way our society is set up. We all have homes, so shouldn't everybody have a home? And if you don't have a home, are you even worthy to have a pet? We'll talk about that. And then some of the lessons learned, what experience has taught me that it's, we'll talk about what my experiences have taught me and how to really manage those and understand what the outcomes really should look like, that are a lot of times very different than how we see how we thought that they would in the beginning. One of the things that experience has taught me is that for the most part, especially as a cruelty investigator, I don't recall ever investigating a homeless person for committing animal cruelty. Not to say it doesn't happen, and not to say in some places it isn't common, but working in Texas for 18 years and being in Philadelphia, and then also on an Indian reservation here where I live now in New Mexico. I don't live on the Indian reservation. I worked as a cruelty investigator on the reservation. I really hadn't experienced a lot of issues where a homeless person would be investigated for animal cruelty. And as I drive around, even in in the different cities I've lived and the city I live now, when I look and I see people who don't, who live outside, who may not have a home, I have not seen anyone that looked like they were being cruelly treated or abused. And that's just based on a visible look at what the person looks like, and then also some of the work I do with homeless people in the community and help and provide for them and their pets. So in this world, obviously we all have voices in our head, and we all have different voices that say different things. And when it comes to homeless people, that there's no the issue is still the same. It's, we have these voices. Houseless people are all on drugs. And so how does that drive a stereotype? That dog that you see on the corner with that homeless person, or walking with that homeless person, or in an encampment, they deserve better than that. Animals should be treated, at some higher status than a person. Though that's another voice. Another voice would be, I don't want a homeless shelter in my neighborhood. So not only are we a lot of times judgmental of homeless people, but we don't want to be any part of the solution in many cases. And then, all they need is a job, is what I hear a lot of people say, or they don't want to work. And the solutions from the outside, they seem really simple, especially when we come from a judgmental mindset that, if only they did this, or if only they did that. And that really looks past the human that is experiencing those things in those situations. And so we'll talk a little bit about that too, and how we address that, and how we integrate the human side of that in our thinking. So one of the, like I said, I am the Maddie's director, or like Allison said, for the Human Animal Support Services Project. And one of the things that an article that came out last year was a blog article from our Haas website, was one that's beautifully titled, Animal Welfare Has a Cruelty to People Problem. And how often have we had to deal with being in either working in an animal shelter, or just any work that we do with people that have pets, and hearing some of the things that are said. Some of the quotes I pulled from the article, I told them never to get another animal again because they are shitty people. Or another quote is the same expletive: humans should never have dogs, cats, children, or or other dependents. And so that's another judgment. But these are actual quotes from actual people. I would go live in a trailer hitch to my Jeep in the Walmart parking lot before I would dump my animals anywhere, let alone in a high kill shelter. Horrible people pray they never get another animal. If you can't afford an animal, don't have one. That's a big one that we'll talk about today. If you abandon your dog, you're an a-hole. If you put your dog in a shelter where a large number of dogs are euthanized due to lack of space solely because you're moving, you are also an a-hole. And so a lot of this doesn't take into account the actual needs of the human and the critical question: why would they be putting their animal in these circumstances? Do we actually think that that's something that they want to do? Well, most of the time the answer is no. But when we do eventually find them and we do eventually talk to them, we want to have that mindset, and we want to be able to look at them in a way that's more human oriented and understanding their circumstance. So we'll talk about that as well. So what I want you to do is dream with me for a second. Imagine a world where we care just as much about our fellow humans as we do about animals. And that's because a lot of times, in my experience, especially as starting in animal shelters, and whether it was working, I'm one of those people that worked in all areas of the shelter, whether it was supporting our vet staff as a vet, fill-in vet tech, or many years out in the field as an animal control officer and cruelty investigator, running a shelter, being a kennel, an animal care attendant in the shelter. And many of my experiences are people that say things like, I love animals, but I hate humans. And that really drives the way we look at people in general. But imagine if you had a reason to judge that person on top of them just coming into the shelter, like that they were poor or that they are homeless. It even doubles, triples, or quadruples the level of judgment and the lack of humanity that we approach the situation with. A lot of times we set up these zero-sum games. It's either animals or pets versus people. And imagine a world where we didn't have to choose either or, where we elevated both. Not saying that you should look at one as greater than the other, but we both, whatever resource or whatever love you have for that animal would be the same for that person. Imagine a world where we were able to say, you know what, we no longer are going to focus on animals. We're going to focus on the person, and we're going to provide that person with so much resource and so much support that the animal is taken care of because we've invested so much in that person, and anything we invested into that person. And I can assure you, especially with homeless individuals, they are so focused on their animal and the love for that animal that anything that they get, any resource they get, is going to be transferred to the animal. And a lot of times they bypass themselves to provide for their loved pet family member. So part of this, I'm going to make an assumption, and one of the best practices as part of this presentation is that you have some type of social work mechanism at your organization, or if you don't, that you seek one out. And mainly that's through having an actual social worker that would be able to supervise some of these processes, as well as help you or actually deliver these processes themselves. Some of your organizations have social workers, probably many don't, but one thing that's critical about that is that a lot of us think that we know what a social worker does and what they do. I know myself, I thought I knew too. And it wasn't until I started working with social workers that I learned things like, social workers are actually trained counselors. They are adding resource to an environment, to the person's environment as well, that will help aid that person. And that's not something that you just know to do, or you can just do by hiring somebody or by having a questionnaire. A lot of times you need trained staff that will help you, because a lot of these conversations that you're going to be having are critical conversations that are ones that might start to might trigger a person, and you need trained staff that know how to handle a person when they are triggered about some of these really personal issues that they are dealing with, and some of the personal needs that they have. Another thing that we'll cover in this presentation is a day in the life, some scenarios that will help you navigate this in a way that honors you, your organization, and also honors the person that you're dealing with. And you're going to hear me talk very little about animals, because I really believe that our main goal is to support that person, and then they can support their animal, but be a support to that person as much as possible. Some perceptions: how do we view pets in human shelters? How we view pets living outdoors with their person, and when to escalate. And also we'll talk a lot about de-escalation as well. We'll also look at some potential solutions and how we can best support pets and people experiencing homelessness. Let's talk about basic grooming and a scenario behind that. So say, for instance, in the morning, a person is staying in the shelter and in a shelter program, and they wake to find that the animal has eliminated in a shared room. This upset other residents. Then they notice the animal's hair and the nails are overgrown, and they accuse the person of animal cruelty. This is a common scenario that I've found in shelters, mostly in disaster response shelters. I've done a lot of disaster response work, and especially when I worked for the Humane Society, and then also in the different cities I worked in. And the issue of animals inside of human shelters in certain situations is a big one, whether it's a homeless shelter or a disaster shelter. And you will get these issues that come up. One of the unseen circumstances is that the person who have experienced domestic assault and is staying in the shelter with their dog and is afraid to leave. So, this is the last place that they have, this may be the only place they have to go. And they may be afraid to move about the shelter because of how they were conditioned. This is another reason why social workers are so important in a shelter. Some things you can do in assessing the situation: engage with the person, informing them that you have services available for their animal, i.e. you may have volunteers that are dog walkers. I know I've been part of shelters that have had that. Ask them, offer them things like, does your pet need a bath? Are they comfortable? Have you ever given them a bath? Just understanding the animal's comfort level. A lot of animals may not like to be handled, especially when it comes to nail trimming and brushing, or through some equipment we'll talk about as well. And the process of escalation in this circumstance would be: is this a one-time event? So is this like a temporary situation? Does it look progressive? Is the lack of grooming causing the pet pain? A lot of times, I don't want you going out there thinking you're a cruelty investigator. That's a whole other course, and you can contact me if you'd love to be, because I also have access to some free animal cruelty training. But this would not be the appropriate scenario for that to happen. Leave that to the trained professionals. And I only mention that because a lot of times I've encountered people who really think that they're animal cruelty investigators, even though they haven't been trained. Is the lack of grooming causing the pet pain? And that would be through visible signs of stress. And if you ever have a question, you can always consult a veterinarian or an animal cruelty investigator, but this would be a situation where I would add resource to that person's circumstance rather than enforcement. Could this issue be addressed on site? Some different ways you could address it on site would be having a partnership maybe with a grooming service that would like to do volunteer work. All professions do pro bono work pretty much, and this would be a great opportunity to partner. Partnerships with trusted dog walkers, the same thing there. There are dog walking services. And some of these things are things that you can explore within your community. Maybe you have trusted volunteers. Maybe you have a partnership with a local animal shelter, which we'll talk about, whether that's a nonprofit shelter or a government shelter. Having a secure areas for humans to walk their animal, to spend time outside of your facility, in an area that is secured. That's basically, by secured we mean fenced in, where the animal can't just freely run off and run out. Is ideal, and a lot of times those places are possible just with a little creative thinking. Having some basic grooming tools like the shedding brush, that's pretty easy. A tub for animals to be groomed, for animals to take a bath, mainly dogs is what we're talking about. And then also maybe a nail grinder. I would not suggest nail trimmers unless you're allowing a trained groomer to be on, or somebody with medical training, because you can cut nails too short. So don't jump in there untrained with equipment that you are not familiar or trained with using. Here's another scenario. A person and their dog sit on the sidewalk on a busy road with a sign that reads, "Anything helps." The dog is calm on a towel. A vehicle passes by and shouts at them that they are irresponsible and they should give their dog up to a animal shelter. And the unseen circumstance is that the person spends most of their money they receive on items to keep their pet fed and comfortable. This makes it challenging for them to afford food and supplies for themselves. This is once again the human. It's funny. I had a conversation with someone at the local shelter here in Albuquerque, and we were just talking about humans and animals. And she posed a monumental question to me, and which was, she said, "Vincent, we get calls to 311 all the time about homeless people that have pets, and they want us to come out and take that animal from that homeless person." And she says, "I wonder how often 311 gets a call from a person that says, I see this homeless person out on the corner, and I would love to know what the resources are for this person." I wonder how many calls 311 gets about. Honestly, in working in different 311 or partnering with different 311s as part of the different cities I've worked in, I've never heard that as a call, that a person is wondering how they can help this homeless person. Now, not to say that it doesn't happen, because I'm sure there are cities where it does. It makes perfect sense, but it's really not something that we commonly think of. And if you think about it, it's not even beyond homeless people. Even people with homes, we got calls all the time about, go investigate this person who doesn't have a dog house at their house for their dog. But I never saw any of the notes a call from a person that said, "Hey, I'm just calling. My neighbor doesn't have a dog house for their dog. Could you point me to some resources?" And so that just is an example of how we can be better as people and more cognizant of the fact that there's a person behind that animal that has needs. And if we continue to provide that person resource, they will provide for their pet, because they love their pet. When you assess the situation, ask questions like, "Do you have any food? Do you need any food or supplies for your animal?" That was a powerful question as part of a homeless program that I help here in Albuquerque. And one thing I discovered is that, all you need to do is take a 45-pound bag of dog food, bag it up in Ziplocs, It takes about an hour, just so you know, to do it, and about an hour and a half to do 90 pounds, and just deliver it to the shelter. And those little Ziploc bags of food can be given out to people who come in and frequent the shelter, or even if you happen to see a homeless person as you're driving through the city, and with a pet, you could provide them with a Ziploc bag of dog food. It makes a big difference. So questions like that really help. Asking the question, informing them of services that are available if interested, and we'll talk about some ways for you to find out what services are available in your community. Some escalation considerations: look at the weight of the animal, look at the general condition. Like I said, most of the time, I mean, I can't think of one right offhand where there was a homeless person who had an animal that was being starved and was underweight. I have not experienced it. And, I've done thousands and thousands of calls and have supervised them. And take a look at the circumstance the animal is living in, or what the animal is experiencing, and also its visible signs of its behavior, which will a lot of times will tell you whether the animal is comfortable or uncomfortable. Like I talked about, some of the, the Human Animal Support Services Project, we are partnered with Pets.Find Help, which basically is a platform for you to be able to go to in your community to find out what resources are in your community. Agencies are able to identify programs they have and have that available, so you can search that website for that to make that happen. Social media, our PASS program, which is a program that a lot of you have, and I know in particular Austin Pets Alive has, that you could research. Build community partnerships with appropriate agencies. Don't feel like you need to do it alone. A lot of agencies are providing these things for people that live outside. So partner with those agencies. Don't just feel like you have to be siloed. And then also contacting 311 for resources. And they may not have them, but I think the more you contact 311, the more they'll give that feedback, and request that from your government agencies, that they do put resources like that in their 311 system. There's an ability to do that in their data warehouse, it's not data warehouse, but it's their warehouse of tools that they use to resource warehouse. Also, national programs, greater good charities. There's a Chewy's truck that goes all over the place. It's not one, it's many, but Chewy's has a program that you can have lots of food delivered. I had about 2,000 pounds delivered to the reservation I used to work on here in Albuquerque, right outside of Albuquerque, the Isleto Puebla. Also Pets of the Homeless is also another program. And also federal grants are available. This one that I have listed here is an emergency and transitional pet shelter and housing assistance grant, which is through the Office of Violent Crimes. That also is another resource that you can, and basically that is to help people who are victims of domestic violence and have a pet, and the resources surrounding allowing them, because we often know that people who are subject to domestic violence won't leave their animal behind. Here's another scenario, an animal with a serious health issue. So I put a cat in this. I know we're focused on dog. My dog is my home, but I wanted to throw a little love to the cats. But this also is something that can be used for small animals as well, as small dogs as well as a solution. A person is camping in a community setting, has lived with their cat for 3 years. The cat has recently lost a lot of weight, and it is noticeable by people who regularly see them. Homeless people encounter all of us just like anybody else does, and so those stereotypes and that concern will be there. In this case, the unseen circumstance is that their cat went to a free veterinary Services Day 2 weeks ago and is noted to have an untreatable disease that causes weight loss. The person has done all they can to keep their animal comfortable. These are the things, one of the things I would deal with all the time are people, I would investigate people and I would say, wow, look how bad this animal is. You must be committing animal cruelty. What I didn't factor in when I was a young investigator is something that I learned, which is, what if that person got that animal and that animal was in that condition when they received that animal and the animal is actually getting better? Or in this case, what if the animal has an untreatable disease and they're caring for that animal as part of the end of life, almost a hospice-like circumstance, and they're just, they want to keep their loved family member. I know I did the same thing. I couldn't let my dog go. How could I do that? Like, she was with me for 15 years. There's no way I'm going to let her just go and just like, it's, like, it's just easy to let go. And so it's very important that we just keep that in mind, that there's a human behind that. And as you can see, I'm getting emotional a bit just because I miss I have 4 dogs, but I miss my sweet Belanca, and it's the same no matter where you are, no matter who you are. If you have a pet, most likely you love them and you want to stay with them as long as possible. Try informing the person of services if they don't or additional services. Create a space where small animals can be isolated in a quiet place in the rest of the facility. That's really important. And sometimes it's possible and sometimes it's not. We're just saying, do the best you can. It's not always going to be, we know you're not working. Those of you that have shelters and have worked in a shelter in an optimal situation all the time, some of you are, but if not, just do the best you can. Knowing the difference between neglect and animal cruelty. Once again, don't turn yourself into an amateur animal cruelty investigator. You want to just, know the difference. There's a difference between neglect, which is a lack of resources most of the time, and intentional cruelty, which is some direct cruel, we're talking stuff like dog fighting, somebody intentionally harming their animal or punishing their animal in a way that is adversely affects that animal's health or their well-being. And then also familiarizing yourself with the laws, because a lot of times, I know what I've heard is people calling things animal cruelty and neglect that aren't definitely not something that an investigator needs to come out on. But then also understanding that, a lot of these cases, the vast majority of cases are unfounded. And the ones that are founded, the vast majority of them can be resolved with resources. Once again, Pets.Find Help is another potential avenue to go down to find those resources. Build some external facing medical care, create an in-shelter support program, utilize existing veterinary practices, start a facility from scratch. There's been a lot of nonprofits that have started from a volunteer or somebody working in a shelter that have decided that they see a problem and a gap in the community and they started themselves. Seek assistance from the veterinary community, whether it's vets or vet techs that want to volunteer or provide some type of support and assistance. Our last scenario is a person that lives in their vehicle with their animal, goes inside of a store to buy supplies. When the car windows are covered, but you can hear the dog barking inside. It is a hot day, and you're concerned that a concerned citizen threatens to break the window to get the animal out. Unless, I would say this: if you're at the point of breaking a window, I would call enforcement. But if you do happen to encounter the person, one of the unseen circumstances is that inside the vehicle there may be cooling stations inside the vehicle, a solar powered fan, ice. You see the windows are covered, which will help the ambient temperature. The dog barks may be due to the owner leaving the car and not because the animal is in distress. Once again, when you encounter that person and you engage the pet owner, Find out if this is a temporary or permanent situation, and what human services they may need that they can add to their circumstance to make it a better outcome for themselves, which I say will transfer to the animal. What's the outside ambient temperature? Generally, temperature, and I even hate to say this because I'm not trying to turn anybody into an amateur cruelty investigator, is about inside of a vehicle with uncovered windows would be about 20 degrees, could be 20 to 30 degrees higher than the outside ambient temperature. When it's covered, you're talking about a lot less, but knowing the temperature inside the car, and then also a visible behavior and condition of the animal is also so important. So get eyes on that animal, and talk to the owner just about, what circumstances might have led to that situation. Some of the potential when it comes to shifting to housing, especially at your shelter, is having crates available that can be donated, or supplies that are part of your already supply chain in your shelter. Designate space for owned pets in your shelter. Some other considerations to prepare yourself to house the person and their pet is partner with the local government or nonprofit animal shelters for training and assistance. And then also another example is building that as part of your I have Haven for Hope here. There is an agency, an organization in the city of San Antonio called Haven for Hope. And part of their planning to help homeless people, it's a very large complex. They built kennels and they had pets as part of their calculus when they put the plans together. So that's always a great practice to have that as part of the initial planning for that facility. But if not, partnering with your local animal welfare community is very important. If you cannot directly offer housing, crowdsourcing temporary pet housing options on social media. Once again, Pet.Find Help is another resource, and then also partner with your local orgs. So in summary, it's common for individuals experiencing homelessness to have pets. Keep that in mind. There's nothing weird about it. We humans have been living outside with pets for tens of thousands of years. So there's nothing unusual about it at all. Programs exist to help provide support to these families. Seek those out. And you can be best part of the solution by building partnerships and understanding community needs and being open to providing solutions rather than judgment to people. And with that, I will open up the floor for any questions that the audience may have.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for that thorough overview. And I really appreciate that you highlighted specific examples and scenarios. There are a couple of questions that we have time for, which is great. I wanted to ask something, a little bit of a nuance on the grooming one. And we're actually going to have office hours with a groomer, I believe, tomorrow. So folks are welcome to bring more questions there. But I wanted to ask you, what happens, or maybe this has happened to you, if the person doesn't accept help? Let's say, for example, the dog is matted, might need grooming, you're offering resources. How would you approach if the person is refusing? And has that happened?
Yeah, it has happened. And sometimes people just need a little time. And I always invite people to a new possibility. You don't want, without having a social worker there, because, and I always lean on the social workers because they can really either provide coaching or do some direct, a lot of times my approach would not be necessarily the best approach just because of my background and my training. A lot of my training is enforcement. And so having that second person that is more used to dealing with people who are in crisis situations, and some of the ways that they may be reacting to me, which may have more to do with how I approach them that I may not recognize, but continuing to invite them to a new possibility, but then also assessing the situation. Is this an emergency situation? Is this something that we can continue to work with the person to lead them to this as a solution, rather than to say, well, this is an emergency right off the bat. This needs to happen today and right now. Giving the people the time and space to make that decision for their animal.
Thanks. And I see that Artesia has her hand up if you want to unmute.
Yes, I do have a question. So I know with our company at LASA, when we engage with clients who do have animals, sometimes we do take them to the animal shelter. That way they can, provide them with services such as grooming, such as getting their shots updated, also with getting the forms so that way they could be titled as their support animals. So I want to know, in different states, do they allow that type of service?
And in terms of having animals as support animals.
Um, More so of support animals, and then providing them with the services like how you stated that we may see a client who has an animal that's not properly groomed or is in need of shots. Are they willing to support that, community with providing those free services to them? Or
That's
is anybody aware of looking into that?
Yeah, they're definitely, that is part of a lot of different states. And I'd love to hear from people in the possibly, if that's possible, in the chat, if that's happening in your state or the place where you where your shelter is. But yeah, there are resources, and Artesia, if you email me, and I am remiss, I didn't put my email in the presentation, but I think it's part of the package you get as being part of the conference. Just email me and I can definitely get you. And that's not only Artesia, but anybody else, so resources for along those lines. And anything else in the presentation too, please email me, because we have a lot of resources.
So there is a question also about resources for social workers to collaborate with shelters who may have budgetary limitations restricting access to a full-time social worker. How would you address that?
So, that's one of the things that as part of our industry, we are becoming more and more aware of. I know that there are universities like the University of Tennessee that has a veterinary social work program that allows you to get certified to be to work at a vet clinic or a shelter. Part of it, and this is just my mentality, is walk in the door and talk to your local shelter, especially if you're a social worker, to find out ways you could volunteer and partner. And then also for those of you that are that have a shelter that either is an animal shelter that is part of this conference, start getting connected to the social service agencies in your community, because they do need your support, and they may not even be aware of it, and they may not even be aware of the services you provide for people with pets. And also on a side note, from a monetary standpoint, there are a lot of federal grants that you could get that are people centered, that would help, that you could partner with an agency, a social service agency that would would provide funding for people that have pets.
Great. And people are putting into the chat, it sounds like Street Dogs in Las Vegas has been assisting people experiencing homelessness and low-income people since 2014, and also Street Dog Project since 2013 in Southern Oregon. So that's great. I wanted to ask you this, because this can sometimes be, you talked a lot about people and about including what's going on with the person and the animal. There's another added layer, right? And sometimes we get pressure from the community.
Yes.
We can get that pressure as animal welfare organizations. We can get that pressure as housing providers. where community members want us to address an animal care situation through law enforcement or animal control.
Yeah.
What would you say to a provider? How do you handle that?
That is a great question, and it's probably the most complex part of this, because, as you said, especially working in a government shelter, because there's those two constituencies of people that want us to go out and hammer everybody. Nobody deserves an animal unless they treat them with this really unrealistic, pristine viewpoint. And then there's also the concern from those who feel like, that we should be providing resources. And then you also have the government, your own government hierarchy, whether it's your council member or somebody in the chain of command above you in your department that wants you to go out and to enforce the law. And so I think one of the biggest, the best ways to handle that is through having resources that, because what we're looking for, and I can speak from an enforcement standpoint, we want the person to be in compliance with the law. Ask yourself, does that necessarily mean that you have to issue them a citation or charge them with a crime? I would counsel that no, the vast majority of the time that's not necessary. Secondly, if you think about it, if I issue that person a citation or I charge them, have I solved the problem? Or am I waiting for the courts to tell me that that person is guilty so the problem will be solved? Meanwhile, that animal that you really want to protect or people want to protect is still not getting provided the services or the assistance that they need. So, I think that the animal control officer is the best outreach program in animal welfare. The only question is, what tools are we providing them? Are we only giving them a ticket book and a process to charge people, or are we also providing them with educational information and resources that they can provide to people they encounter, so that they worked hand in hand in partnership with that person to provide a solution for that animal, if we really believe that, if we really want to help the animal and not just gratify a justice system that is way too punitive most of the time. And I can remember us charging people that, well, instead of turning our courts into an indigent or poverty court, because we're pushing people who could be using those resources to resolve the problem instead of paying fines.
Right. Artesia, I see your hand up. I just want to, Sharon put a comment in the Q&A. I'll just read Sharon's comment. She said, one factor in someone refusing could be trying to remove the pet from the person. This is not an uncommon trick. Return to the person and show you care, but also have the person stay with the pet at all times. Much too often, mistrust of others is well earned by past nastiness. What would you say to that comment?
I would equate it to our own experience. The less you know someone, the less, or at least I can relate to my own experience. The less I know somebody, the less open I am to feedback from them. And so the reality is that we tend to, and this is the human part of us, or the part of us that dehumanizes people. We tend to, when we come from a judgmental mindset, a lot of times, and I'll speak for myself, when I come from a judgmental mindset, I tend to forget that I am dealing with a person who doesn't know me, who I haven't established a rapport with, who has no reason to trust me. They don't even know me. So why not work to establish that bond? One of the things, and we'll go to the next question after this, I learned working with the homeless population is how many stories and what the stories are behind their lives. And the fact that to stop looking at them as an outsider and to know that they experience the same emotion. Fear is gigantic in the homeless communities that I've worked with. And so why wouldn't that transfer over to you in terms of They don't know you. And so working to establish that bond of trust is extremely important before we go and start hammering people.
And Artesia, I just want to make sure, did you have another question that you wanted to follow up on?
Yeah. So when you mentioned a lot of caseworkers not understanding, when it comes to trauma or why the participant has the animal involved, how do we basically get to implement trainings? Because we do have a lot of people who do come on board. Yes, you may have the degree or whatsoever, but a lot may not have the same lived experience, or
Mhm.
some people may not even view animals a certain way. So how is it that we can implement a mandated training for others to at least see that this is why this clients are in need of having the support. This is why if you feel like, oh, well, we don't want to accept people with animals, that, oh, because it's easy for them to move on, when it's like you're literally dismissing their concerns and you're not paying attention to why they need that support. So how can we basically mandate those type of trainings for every facility to have access to this and understand the need of it?
I always believe in doing my homework. And one of the things in animal welfare that we're not that great at, but we are getting better, is learning from the experts and not deciding that we're the expert. Finding the people in those. So for instance, if you are a human service oriented shelter, seek out resources and partnerships with animal shelter staff or those professionals that are have an expertise in working with animals, and have them help you co-create a training program. The worst thing you can do is take concepts from another discipline or from another industry, and have somebody who's inexperienced implement those concepts and train on those concepts. Because you're right, Artesia, they don't have the lived experience, and it also undermines the confidence people have in the training, because a lot of times it won't work. People will start to look at it as, well, this didn't really help me, and this actually did more harm than good. And so doing your homework is extremely important, and then also partnering with experts and having an ongoing partnership, maybe through a memorandum of understanding. And then as far as making it part of your training, I'm a big believer in making it part of the policy, and then also training people on the policy and the process behind the policy, and basing that policy and process on the principle, whatever principle it is that you want to have as part of your policy. Those are some things and elements that I would definitely add to my training program.
I think we have time for one quick question. Samantha asked, as a veterinary professional who's graduating in May and doing emergency relief in Charleston, what can we do? Yes, congratulations, Samantha. What can we do to help dispel misconceptions and provide education and resources for people experiencing homelessness and shelters?
I would say get involved. And by that, if you're not already involved, get involved, and so that you can be an ambassador. That was one of the most powerful things I did, is the more I learned about homeless people, the more of an ambassador I am, and can speak to my experiences with them. I can't speak to their experience, but I can speak to my experiences with them. But then also partner with, be that activist, be that person that partners and rallies the troops to figure out ways for you. And and in different communities, the need and resource gaps will be different. And so, take some time to learn. Use platforms like Pets.Find Help and find out what resources are in your community and which ones are not. And, work with like-minded people to provide that. There's that saying that we want to be the change that we see in the world. And it's so true, because it is, all it takes is one person to stand in the gap for someone, and to make a difference. And then, to rally those troops, like I said, and to partner And sometimes all it is information partnering for people who may not even know that this need is there, but have the resource to provide it.
Thank you so much, Vincent, for such a thoughtful presentation and discussion.
All right. Okay, Allison, I'll see you soon, I'm sure. All right.